Thank you, Whitney, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking some time today, and we hope you find it valuable. In my role as Chief Strategy Officer, one of the things I do is host roundtable discussions with our customers. I also spend a lot of time with our executives and our customers talking about the current environment, the situation, looking at what's working and what's not for them, and figuring out novel solutions of how to move forward. One of the big things that we had seen early on with the the pandemic is this bigger push to really go digital. And it was interesting in having these discussions about digital transformation that a lot of the companies in the accounting departments have never taken this issue on before. And how do you transform, and specifically, how do you get your customers to change the way maybe they pay you, that they engage with you, et cetera. So I want to share some of the best practices and the learnings that we've had from those discussions. Just as context, Lockstep is the publisher of Anytime Collect. Anytime Collect is an AR automation solution that lowers your DSO, so it basically brings the cash in faster. It also frees up a lot of staff time because of the use of the automation. That staff time can be used for higher priority things. A couple of factors that really play into it. One, it's a cloud-based solution, which means you can really work from anywhere. It supports a fully remote model. It provides automated customer communications based on the aging of the invoices. So it's tracking that and sending out reminders at appropriate times and nudging them along to the appropriate payment. There's a full customer self-service portal where they can go in and access their account online, do things like reconciliation with their own books, as well as be able to pay you. Collections activity management is really the capability for all the activities of the team to be assigned, tracked, and reported to drive efficiency, just in terms of following up on things and doing the right thing at the right time. And then finally, forecasting and reporting. We have a whole way of doing projected cash receipts, so you get visibility into what might be coming in based on customer payment behavior, as well as reporting on team activities, things like adoption, et cetera. So we'll cover some of these as we go through. We serve some really great brands. We have over 180 customers and continuing to grow that base. And that's because one of the things is we're the leaders in ERP integration. So we integrate to the broadest number of solutions out there with deep automation capabilities to make that happen. So that's a little bit of background about Anytime Collect, our product, and some of what it does. What we'd like to do now is just really jump into the topic of AR best practices and the new normal. And unfortunately, the new normal is not going away anytime soon. I remember back, in March when we went into the shelter-in-place orders here in Washington State. There were some thoughts that maybe by the summertime it would change, and then it's just continued to move. And I think as we head into the winter, we realize that that the situation is something that is current and something that we have to plan for, because we don't know what that horizon looks like. And consequently, when you think about that environment, it's an environment with a lot more risk, business risk of all kinds. If you had customers that were in the hospitality business, cash flow has become a bigger issue. So cash flow is really bumped to the top priority. This is research that Deloitte recently did in the July and August timeframe, where they were talking to CFOs and saying, what are your priorities? And over half of them put, managing liquidity and cash flow as their top priority. And it only makes sense, right? Because, just making sure that you can keep the operations flowing is critical by pulling that cash in. So the question becomes, as a CFO, as a controller, how can you, take charge of cash management? How can you control that? Well, the truth is you can't really directly control what your customers are going to do. What you can control is what your team does. Is your team doing the right things? Are they doing it the right way? And are they doing enough of them? That's really one of the things that has to come into play. And you can imagine the amount of activity that's needed today is actually increased. So with that increased risk, there needs to be more outreach to, Find out, are your customers still paying on time? You know, are they still operating? There's a bunch of questions that you've got to be able to go out and answer and work with customers. Maybe putting in installment plans becomes a more frequent activity. Those are things that you have to then say, have I armed my team with the right tools to make this happen? And so as you think about that, we've identified basically 3 sets of cash traps that we've seen in accounts receivable and that we're helping people sort of get rid of in order to improve the cash flow. And when we look at, and we benchmark AR best practices, when we look at kind of current state of affairs, these are statistics that are pretty interesting, right? And also somewhat, you know, alarming in their own way. 40% of all invoices that go out right now are going out as paper. That's a pretty big percentage. Now that is from an analyst firm, IDC, that indicates that that's the state of affairs in the US at least. When we did our own research, we did over 1,000 interviews of AR departments and found that 90% of AR departments are using Outlook and Excel or Gmail and Google Sheets to manage their cash flow. That's the primary way of communicating with customers, tracking follow-ups, recording things, all the activities being done in Outlook or Gmail. And then 12% of invoices are processed online. So again, that's an IDC number that indicates just how much activity is being done online versus through paper or email inboxes. So it does bring us to our first poll question. We're interested just, of the people here, because we're always trying to validate, what the analyst said versus what we're seeing in the marketplace. So I'm curious to see how many people still have paper invoices. So we've got several coming in. About 20% of the respondents here indicate 40% or more. We've got about 10% that say 10 to 20%. And it's a good number here. There's about 70% that indicate 0 to 10%. Now it's bumping around on me a little bit, so some of those are moving around. But it's great to see that such a large percentage of you have a much lower threshold than that 40%. So we'll go ahead and end the polling here. Thank you for participating. So paper's a cash trap, right? Who wants paper in today's age? It's expensive. There's filing cabinets, it's slow. Let's face it, it's a lot more work. I think the biggest thing about paper too is that it's an office anchor. When you think about best practice and the new normal, this ability to be remote is critical. But if you've got paper coming into the office, that's a real office anchor where you're going to have to drive into the office to get that paper and process it. The other thing is if you issue a paper invoice, you're more than likely going to get a paper check, and that's just really slow turnaround time. Those are the things that, in today's economic environment, slowing down your cash flow can be a self-inflicted wound, and you just don't want to be able to do that. And as we talked about, it's very, very hard to automate. One of the things that we heard from our customers is also just the expense of printing at home. If you're printing out a paper invoice and you're doing it off an inkjet versus the laser printer at work, first of all, it's much slower, it's much more expensive, right? There's a bunch of problems with that. So, paper has really come to the forefront as something to get rid of. The other cash trap that we see a lot of is the personal inbox. So personal inboxes, if you're using Outlook or you're using Gmail, there might be a shared inbox that the accounting department has, or distribution, which is accounts receivable at mycompany.com. But then that very quickly moves into maybe, Matt's inbox where I'm down working on it. And the problem with that is it's an information black hole. Nobody can see into my inbox except me. The rest of the team can't see it. My manager can't see it. There's a bunch of issues that get associated with that. And that can slow things down of not knowing what's going on. They're also bottlenecks. If I'm out of the office, right, if I'm sick or something along those lines, my work isn't getting done, and it's stuck in there. None of my team can actually jump in for me and take it over and do things. And the more, by the way, the more personal inboxes there are, because each of us have it, the more bottlenecks that are being created. There's also, a crack that can, if I decide, oh, I want to move on to another company, and the customers I had been working with continue to email me, they may go straight to my email box and just get stored there. And then nobody's maybe checking it. It's now gone down this crack and it's not getting processed. And ultimately, these all lead to fire drills, right? Because then guess what happens? An escalation occurs and you're having to respond. So not only did you slow the payments down, bringing that cash in, but you also start to create lots of reactionary work that could have been proactively resolved with the right approach. The final cash trap I'll talk about is actually attachments. So interestingly, the state of the art today is to exchange PDFs back and forth between accounting departments. A good example of that is just customer onboarding. So if you've got a new customer and you want to collect information from them, maybe a tax exemption certificate, maybe you want to collect their EIN and some, their AP department address. All of that kind of information is typically being put into a PDF. Problem is you send that PDF over, they fill it out, you get it back. You have to now type in that PDF directly into your system. It's slowing the entire process down. And that's true on statements and invoices and everything else along the line. And there's a much better approach to being able to get out of that and by putting people online. And we'll talk about that in more detail. One last poll question. It goes back to the question about emails. We're curious what you use to manage your emails. We asked the anytime collect question because a lot of times we have customers that join the call. So we have, and today's call, wow, the highest percentage we've seen on this, 100% of the attendees today are using Outlook or Gmail. We typically see anywhere from 80 to 90%, but this is definitely a high number. Thank you for sharing. So I want to talk about best practices. Best practice number one is to replace paper with email. One of the challenges that we've talked to people about is just getting that as a upfront thing that's done and that it gets verified. Because if you have a good email address, there's a couple of very powerful things about it. First of all, it's ubiquitous. Every single accounting department in the entire world has an email address. In some cases, it might be a personal one, but they're guaranteed to have email. The power of email is you can automate it. You can do things like mail merge with data from the accounting system. You can trigger it, as we talked about, being able to, based on certain events, have it go out. And it's fast. It's not as though it has to travel physically. And so the ability to accelerate the cycle is much higher. So that ubiquitous nature, the level of automation that you can do, and the speed is really one of the things that says getting the accurate email address of every single one of your customers should be a top priority. The next best practice is to replace a personal inbox really with a shared workspace. So what are the attributes of a shared workspace? The team should be able to work on activities and have full integration with the accounting system. This is, as I mentioned, to be able to do something like a mail merge, to be able to have the history about what's happened on this account, the aging information at their fingertips. All of that aging and tracking needs to be available so that they can have the information that's needed. Then there needs to be automation. Think about the activities that you want people to do on a daily basis. Or that you need to do on a daily basis. There's prep time for that activity. Well, if you could automate that all the right information's been assembled and available to you, that the relevant contacts are already identified, that saves you prep time. If during the call or during the activity, You're able to record a promise quickly, record a, request a follow-up, all of that, and have it automatically done. Then again, that's saving you time. You're not having to go in Excel and fill out information, et cetera. And then post-call, if it organized all the notes and put it where you need it to be, again, you're not having to update, something by hand. This is doing all of that. And you can concentrate instead on the customer and focus on the conversation, doing the right thing with the customer. There's a lot more control. So the ability to have business rules around, who's assigned what is the priority of the work, all of that important control can really make sure you're focused on the right activities. So back to what we originally talked about, are you doing the right activities the right way and doing enough of them? These are the things that allow you to do that. And then ultimately, visibility. Can you see into what got done today and who's responsible for that? So that's the best practice. If you don't have that ability for these kinds of capabilities, then you're really not going to be able to operate at that highest level. The third best practice is to replace attachments, as we talked about earlier, with Magic Link access to a self-service portal, right? So how do you get customers online, let them do something? Now, the reason I talked about Magic Link access, Magic Link, if you haven't heard of that before, it's like a one-time password. It's a secure link that can only be used, for instance, one time to be able to go online. And so if your emails are giving these nice magic links to your customers, they hit that, they don't have to have a password, and they're able to gain access to their account. It allows them to either make a payment or, for instance, be able to do their own reconciliation all online and do it in a secure manner. So if we took these three best practices together, right, and we talked about how does all this work, this is a situation of kind of when it's all running together. So an AR solution should hook up to your accounting solution or your ERP and synchronize data over needed for the collections process. Once that's brought over, there should be automated business rules that trigger off, for instance, when should a communication be sent to a customer? And that communication would have in there, for instance, a reminder that an invoice is coming due, containing a magic link where they can see that invoice online and that they can then make a payment. So that through that customer self-service, they can make a payment. Now, in a perfect scenario, this is 100% automated and you're really able to scale up your operations and know what's going on. But a customer may have an issue. There may be a dispute. They may be having some of their own cash flow issues and want to negotiate an installment plan. There's any number of things that might come up, in which case that engine can actually trigger an activity to be done by one of the team members to go and work on that with the customers. So that's, when you're looking at a best practice, this is a way to get kind of that maximum number of leverage. A couple of things in here to note. Every single customer gets communicated with on every single invoice at the right time. Without that level of automation, typically you're only chasing down 60 days past due. This is giving you new scale to be able to engage with customers in a much better way. I'm going to move on to the fourth best practice. So once you have, if you will, an infrastructure in place and you now have a way of engaging with your customers in a much better way, this is a big one, which is to drive adoption. So your customers have to change their behavior. They have to be willing to say, I won't take paper anymore. They've got to say, oh yeah, I really like the magic link. And the way we think about adoption is what percentage of customers have engaged digitally. Once they've engaged, do they turn that as their preferred channel? So they would rather go online than maybe call you for a missing invoice or a new statement. And does that frequency go up? Because if it does, it really has a way to sort of reduce your DSOs, meaning you're collecting cash faster. It also increases their customer satisfaction. They can do things that they want to do when they want to do it. And ultimately, it also helps to reduce your workload. So you can focus on other higher priority things. We've developed, in conjunction with the customers, what we call an adoption roadmap. This is where our team, our customer success team, actually comes in and not only helps to implement Anytime Collect, but then to get your customers to adopt it and change their behaviors. The way we do that is we upfront work to identify what are the big drivers of business for you. What objectives would you like to see? Then we launch what we call a harvest campaign, the ability to go out and get emails for missing emails, update some templates, train the staff really on, okay, so here's a new voice recording that you're going to have on your greetings for the phone. So you want to be able to, for instance, say, for faster service, visit us online. Obviously keeping stakeholders up to date, and then launching that and monitoring adoption. So those are kind of some key things that we do working with customers to say, not only implement the best practices, but make sure that your customers are adopting that with you. Here's a great example of some of the baseline metrics that we evaluate. One of which is just the ability to eliminate, the cost of paper. At a recent company, we were able to take them from over 4,500 statements per month in paper down to under 300. That's estimating just the paper costs alone, and what it cost to do that was over $80,000 worth of savings. There's other things that we talked about as deflecting inbound inquiries. So we typically are saving anywhere from 10 to 20% of staff time to be able to go focus on higher value priorities. Accelerating payments, we're reducing DSOs by over 30%. Recently, one was by 70%. We reduced the DSOs. So these are different things that you can be done, and measuring those and baselining them, and then as you drive adoption, seeing how they change. Promotion is a big thing. So we actually provide whole infrastructure around announcement emails, an explainer video of what it means to go online, statement insert material so that people know how to register their email address. If they're getting a paper statement today, how do they register that email address online? Changes to the corporate voicemail, corporate website, email signature. These are all ways that you can help coax your customers to really move online with you. There's one more best practice that I want to cover that is important, and it's really that ability to automate forecasting and reporting. Projected cash flow is one of them, right? So you want to be able to have good visibility into what's coming down the pipe. Tracking team performance, who's doing well, who might need some coaching. Monitoring adoption, we just talked about, tracking how many customers are currently using the online accounts, how many people are paying you, how many people paid today, last month, all of that available and ready for you there. And then another really critical one is keeping stakeholders informed. So automating report distribution to your stakeholders that they may need, CEOs, certainly CFOs are asking for cash forecasts almost on a daily basis. How is that automatically delivered and made available to them? So those were the best practices we wanted to cover with you today. If you implement those best practices, they can have a huge impact on your business. It can increase the cash flow pretty dramatically, which increases liquidity and working capital. Your cash from operations actually improves, especially as you're able to have more in the bank. We talked about freeing up staff time, and ultimately all of these benefits come to the bottom line to increase shareholder value. We hope you found the best practices useful, and that it's something that you can think about inside your own business. If you'd like to get started now, we'd encourage you to visit anytimecollect.com. We certainly request a demo. We also have an assessment where we go look at your metrics, because we have an industry benchmark database that we can actually benchmark you against what our customers are seeing of similar size based on the investments they made. Great industry-leading blog, lots of really good materials out there, including a collector's toolkit, so a free collector's toolkit out there, and some great white papers as well. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions that people might have.